welcome to Sparking Everyday Discipleship, where we discuss discipleship in the 21st century, focus on discipling our children, and celebrate books that help us with everyday discipleship every day, sparking important conversations with our children. I'm your host, Terrie Hellard Brown, and we're thankful that you decided to spend time with us today. We really do appreciate your time and you being here. We have a wonderful guest today. I can't wait for you to meet her. So let's jump right in and join the conversation. Today we have with us a special guest. Darlene Corbett is with us. And Darlene, thank you for taking the time to talk with us today.
My pleasure. It's great to be here, Terry. I appreciate the invite.
Well, tell us a little bit about yourself. I know you're a therapist and a writer. Tell
Yes,
us about what you write and what kind of therapy you do.
sure. Well, I started writing nonfiction in 2011. I wrote an article about hypnosis. That's one of the things I used to do. I was frightened to death because you're exposing yourself, but it got published in my NESW paper in Massachusetts. Then I got the courage to write more and wrote more nonfiction. Then I believe truly, as a woman of faith, God called me to write fiction. But he also said, you have a lot to learn. So I really just kept rewriting and rewriting. I entered contests. I was told, you need to really work on these things. I did. Then it got better. Finally, my first novel was published, Visible, about a therapist. So I based it on a 55-year-old therapist. It's not me. People think it's me, but it's not. But fast parts of it are. How can it not be? We're not in the room with 50 million therapists. But it's about a therapist who runs a group for 10 successful professionals but wounded. And in this 10-week group, she discovers she's wounded herself. She knew she was, but she really looked at it. Went out to a tango studio and has had an opportunity for a second chance at love, being widowed. So that's what the book is about. It's a second chance novel, women's fiction with lots of sprinklings of romance. Also, a Christian worldview. I have people of faith in that book. And so, my own work, being a therapist for over, well, let's see, I've been in private practice 35 years plus, and I've been in the field 40 years. And I've just worked with a variety of different populations, but mainly now people pretty high functioning, but like all of us, wounded. I used to do couples, I used to do groups, I used to do hypnosis. Now I'm an individual therapist, but I still mainly deal with relationship issues, secrets, confidence. They confide in me with in a way they can't with other people, and marvelous people. They'd be my friends if they weren't my clients. It's all virtual now too.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so I just want to clarify, because we did talk about your book beforehand a little
Yes.
bit, that it is appropriate for anyone with a Christian worldview and it
Yes.
is clean.
Yes. It's very clean. I
Yeah.
don't I don't think the most is kisses. If even there's kissing and a lot of sensuality in terms of looks, but nothing about sensuality when I mean you can feel the love and romance or passion or attraction, but there's nothing. There are themes. I will warn people, however, all the characters are fictionalized. They come from my vast imagination. However, the themes are not. There are themes of not a lot and not explicit, but suicide,
Mm.
sexual abuse, gaslighting, eating disorders. Those are the most flagrant I
Okay.
can think of right now. Yeah.
Well, that's good to know. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
So the reason I asked you on was because I'm in a lot of Facebook groups and I do a lot of live events, and a lot of moms talk to me. And my husband and I have been in ministry for over 40 years, and we have dealt with a lot of family life and marriage counseling and all of that as a pastor, but not professionally as a licensed therapist. And I'm just seeing so many things that hurt me, hurt my heart. You want to fix things, you want to help
Yes.
people. And so we wanted to just talk about marriage today and how to build a strong marriage. I want to touch on what should a woman do, or a man, if they're in an abusive relationship? How can we build a healthy relationship? And I think your title of your novel makes me think of one thing for sure. We want to be seen and heard by those we love. And so tell us, start with that. Start, how
Sure.
important is it that we are truly seen and heard by the people in our that we're in relationship with?
Sure. I've seen a number of people that have been in abusive relationships. Now, when I say abuse, you have emotional, but you have the physical too, which is the safety issue. It does make people feel invisible. A lot of people will say the emotional is worse. However, being touched, we know once is too much. If someone, I really believe people that are the victims, if you will, and I don't like to use, I don't want to use that word over and over because you want to empower them so they don't feel
Right.
victimized, right?
Right.
But if the biggest thing is safety. If they feel unsafe, they need to find a way to get away from this person. If this person's willing to get help, fine, but they should get help for themselves. I've sat with many, not many, the last several years, but some who are very emotionally abused. A couple of them physically abused. One in particular, and these people, people assume it's disorganized families or poverty. These are
Mhm.
very high function, right? Very
Yeah.
intact on the outside, well to do, extremely successful. Picture speaks 1,000 words. I used to say that. Not anymore. What you see on Facebook, people will say to me, Darlene, that was me. It no longer it's really what I say now, what's behind the picture. So
Yeah.
I say the first thing is someone should get help and find the right therapist. Find one, especially if you're a person of faith, find one that honors that because I'm in the secular world as well. Even though I'm a woman of faith, I'm not what you would call a Christian therapist. I honor it, I celebrate it. But there's a lot of therapy out there that's much more secular. That's fine, as long as they respect your faith base and not in any way put you down. So, first of all, find the right therapist, someone that's going to listen to you, someone that's going to empathize with you. If your spouse doesn't want to get help, then work with a therapist and how you, number one, if it's safety around physicality, get out. You need to find some way to get out. But if it's emotional, which is a much more convoluted, twisted, harder to for some people detect because they've gotten way down so much, really help them get the help. And if the spouse isn't willing to get help, then they need to find a way to get away from this person. Hopefully, and sometimes they do find peace. Even if the spouse doesn't get help, the spouse is frightened enough that they may lose that person and that they do start to get better.
Yeah. Well, I know I was reading one woman's post the other day, and I think that's one of the reasons I contacted you,
Yeah.
is she's got young children. I think she's expecting their third child,
Yes.
and her husband has started having affairs and has become physically abusive. And she, because they're new believers, she doesn't want to divorce him. And I think we have this stigma as Christians with divorce being like the unforgivable sin,
Yes.
and it is so not. In fact, the Bible, I don't believe, even calls it a sin.
Not
It
it.
certainly may be because of sin. It may, sometimes lead to sin, but it's in itself, it's sad. God hates it,
Right.
but he wouldn't allow it if it were truly sin.
That's right.
And so I agree with you 100%. If you're in an abusive relationship, especially if you're in danger or your children are in danger, you've
Yes.
got to get out. You
Yes.
don't have to divorce necessarily, but you got to get out. And I've had a dear friend who was actually murdered, and her children were murdered by her husband, who was, or her, actually, it was a boyfriend who was abusive. And her family tried and tried to get her to leave, and she thought she could fix him. She thought she could help him. What would you say to a woman who thinks she can help change an abusive spouse?
Uh, People can only change if they're willing to change. I'd say to someone, they're not going to change if they're not willing to change and look at their own behavior. That is, I've never had that, thank God. But that I've heard stories like that, but I've never had that. But yeah, that you can't, if they're not willing to examine themselves, you can't do it. And you have to decide if this continues to be corrosive, you need to leave. I agree with you. Divorce is there for a reason. I'm Catholic also. In the Catholic religion, annulment, but and people, that used to be, I don't want to say it was abused, not to use
Yeah.
that word, but people didn't always use people in powerful positions that could get that from the bishop or the pope would use it. However, there are three things mainly: it's addiction, abuse, and adultery. I'm not saying people should leave for addiction or adultery, but abuse, people don't see that as a betrayal, Terry. They often see. I used to do what's. I did some evaluations for people undergoing gastric bypass evaluation. I used to always be in. I've always been in private practice, but one day a week, And it was interesting. Some of those people I saw, as well as one of my own clients, they didn't see the abuse, the physical abuse, as a betrayal. They
Oh
saw
my
the
goodness.
adultery as, and don't get me wrong, adultery is betrayal. But
Yeah.
touching you and hurting you, they wouldn't leave for the physical abuse, but they left because of the adultery.
Wow.
And
Wow.
I couldn't wrap my head. And obviously, the evaluations I didn't. It was a one shot deal, so I didn't pursue it. I might have said it to a few people, but the client I work with on a regular basis, I said, that is a betrayal.
It
That
is.
is. That is. And she said, well, he broke up our family. He had his hands around my neck, and my child saw it. And I said, so it's so interesting. It's so, again, convoluted that physical abuse or emotional, and when I say emotional, there's great gradations, are betrayals to the spirit. It's annihilating, it's trying to annihilate your spirit.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah,
It's a kind of murder in a way. They're
that's right.
trying to do away with you and who
That's right.
you are. And I tell my kids all the time, they're not married yet. I have 4
Yeah.
kids. But in a marriage, in a strong relationship, respect is almost more important than love.
Yes.
And
Yes.
when you find the one you want to marry, there has to be mutual respect. And if you lose that, or they don't continue with that, or you can't respect that person, you shouldn't marry them, in
That's
my
right.
opinion. And you shouldn't try to change someone. I said, first of all, with my daughter, she's kind of a perfectionist. I'm like,
Yeah.
you're never going to change him.
Yeah.
You
Yeah. That's
know?
right. That's right. They have to be willing. It's up
Yeah,
to them.
we change ourselves. We
That's
decide
right.
what we're gonna change, and but if you can't accept and respect him the way he is, then he's not the one, and if
That's
he
right.
can't respect and accept you, then you're not the one for him, and I just think that's something we don't talk about
Yeah.
enough, but when we look in the scriptures and it talks about submitting to one another, that's respect at
You
the
know, that's
core.
really a good point. And
Yeah,
our society seems to interpret love as that initial fire, the
yeah,
fireworks, which you need, right? But it's
yeah,
really the long, steady flame that keeps two people together.
true.
It's that flame that needs to keep, I've seen some people, they leave their marriages after an affair. And some marriages, again, believe me, I'm not justifying an affair, but I never forget I saw one woman, beautiful couple, beautiful family, lots of money. See, up here they had everything.
Uh-huh,
One day she came to see me and said, oh, my intimacy's never been great. And then I felt bad as a therapist. I thought, did I not help them enough? Because that's what you do as a therapist, you feel bad. But so long story short, what really happened is she had an affair. So in the end, he trusted her. They were willing to work at it. He came back. Then she went out and ran into this person. That was the end of the marriage. But I'll never forget. She came to see me one more time. She said, do you think the marriage would have worked if I hadn't had an affair? And I said, look, if you're unhappy, you're unhappy. However, marriage is, when you have an affair, it becomes like living color, blaring color, and marriage becomes black and white. And that's what it does. So it does affect it because you're thinking that's real. That's real. It's not.
yeah,
So,
yeah. We've helped some couples who've had infidelities or at least almost
yeah.
infidelities and seen God heal that relationship, and it can happen.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
my parents divorced when I was in college, and it was because my dad cheated. Thankfully, he's come back to the Lord and is awesome.
Good. Good.
But back then, her pastor counseled her and said, "You don't have to get a divorce." At that time, it's like if someone cheats on you, you have to get a divorce.
I know.
No,
Right.
if the parties are willing to work on it, there you don't have to get a divorce. A marriage can survive. It's hard.
Absolutely.
It's a lot of hard work,
It
but
is.
a marriage can survive infidelity. But abuse is a whole different thing because that is like
Absolutely.
slow murder, in my opinion,
I
and
think you're
sometimes
right.
fast murder, unfortunately.
It is slow murder. You're right. Because infidelity, if the person is truly remorseful, I mean, trust has been breached. And I've sat with some people that do stay together. And sometimes they get past it. I agree with you. But the betrayal of being hurt, the misuse of power, and the fact that people don't see it as a betrayal, to me,
Yeah,
whether it be physical, which is the worst. I mean, because your safety is at risk, but emotional. That's slow, like a slow, steady drip, drip, drip. How they say it hollows out a stone. It tries to hollow out your soul.
yeah,
And if the person, and I've seen this. with men that are abusive to women. I've also seen women abusive to men,
Mhm.
mostly. Again, men have more physical, obviously, power. They have more, their physicality. We can't change anatomy and physiology, but women can use their tongue just as sharply.
That's true. Yeah.
Yes,
I had a friend who we knew her husband was abusive, and when we got to talking to both of them, she was actually kind of worse than he was.
it
As
can.
but it was hers was verbal and his sometimes turned physical.
Oh,
But I thought she was unrelentless. It was like she
yes.
was trying to get him
Yeah.
to get to that point, and I never understood that. It was a very odd thing because that was my first time to see where the woman was abusive
Yeah.
towards the husband like that. But,
Well, it's
um
it's more hidden sometimes, and men are embarrassed or ashamed, so
Oh,
they,
yeah, true.
it's a whole they masculine it. But go ahead, yeah,
Mhm, yeah. So if we have some young people who are married, they have children, they don't want to divorce, but they're in a situation that is just miserable, it's unhappy. What what would be your first advice? You said get a good therapist, a therapist who respects your faith or is a
yes,
Christian therapist, and I agree 100%.
yeah,
There's so much. I studied psychology and sociology for my bachelor's degree, and it's just humanism,
yeah,
and so
absolutely,
yeah, you've got to get a Christian therapist or
yes,
someone who at least
yeah.
respects that.
Well,
Um,
especially even more now, I feel
yeah,
because the world has become very secular, almost, and my field has become extreme more so than it even was before. So I think that's important. Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, I do too. What would be some points you would give someone, some pointers you would give someone who's really wanting to save the marriage or wanting to save the relationship if it's possible? If both people are willing to
Yeah.
work on it, what would be some things you would talk about?
Well, first of all, I think a lot of people, the person that does the abusing, I'll use usually the man. Okay, they often don't want to go to therapy. They don't until it gets so bad, and the
Yeah.
woman wants to leave. But if they came in willing, first of all, the therapist, you want the therapist to let them try to examine what do you imagine would help you stop being so abusive. You see that this is a misuse of power, but is a couple if I did couples therapy, I'd make sure they saw an individual therapist also, because I think both would probably benefit if possible. You have only so many resources, but I would really try to help the people. If it's his if someone's being abusive, it's because they feel weak.
Hmm.
Often, they've been bullied. They're playing out something from their past, like watching their own parent. I would try to get them to reframe, to try to see how is that working. If you want this marriage to work, what do you think you could do differently? How could you approach your spouse differently? Walk away, go outside. I know this sounds very simplistic, but sometimes simple is easier. Take some breaths. But how is this helping your marriage if you want it to work? I would make them think.
Mhm.
How by you putting your wife down is that helpful to your marriage?
That's
You get
good.
them to think.
Yeah, because it's a reactionary thing a lot of times. They don't know why they do it or what
That's
they're
right.
doing it for.
That's
Yeah.
right. So
One
if
of
you
the
interrupt it and say get them to think, they might say, I don't know. But go ahead. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I was gonna say one of the things that when we first got married, I'm a very quick-witted person
Yeah.
for the most part. My husband has ADD, and
Okay.
so he has to take time to process
Yeah.
things. And
Yes.
so every time we had an argument, I won because he had to process and he could come back with something later and explain something, but he couldn't remember details and it was getting a little abusive
Yeah.
because he never won an argument. This is our
Yeah.
first year of marriage.
Sure. Sure.
And and we went to a couples retreat and it was a Christian marriage workshop and they taught us this talk and listen session they called it. It was the most amazing transformative thing for our marriage because it gave him the opportunity to process and think and it made me shut up. and, and
That's
so we started doing that. Now we don't even have to
Yeah.
sit down and practice it is just part of who we are.
Yeah.
And but, I've had people poo-poo on that because they're like, "Oh, it's just psycho jumbo mumbo," and I'm like, "No, it works because it makes it an even playing field." And we always said, we're always on the same team. We're fighting against the problem, not each other. And
That's
we've
good.
always tried to maintain that attitude in our marriage. And I think it's helped us build a strong marriage. And we'll be married 40 years this May.
Good for you.
So,
Well, good. It
but,
shows you can
you
get
know,
past, well, and you're right. A lot of people don't, most people don't listen, Terry.
yeah,
Whether it be in marriage or friendships or just meeting someone, they truly, people assume everyone listens, but they don't. So good for you for changing that dynamic in your relationship because marriage is hard.
it is.
My husband passed last year and I was married 31 years. We had a
That's
few episodes of we weren't sure we were going to make it, but we did.
mhm.
And we worked at it.
Well, I'm so
And
sorry for your loss. That
yeah,
must be
thank you
hard.
so much. Yeah, I don't. It will be. It was 10 months ago, January 9th, and he was my best friend and ally. I know he's smiling from afar. He had his body. He had a weird disease called Charcot-Marie Tooth. It was peripheral neuropathy, and he had a lot of complications. And I
Oh,
prayed. He almost passed the year early, and I prayed. I said, "Give me one more year," and I did. I got it. He's a very good man, and
wow.
so anyway. But marriage is not easy.
Yeah. And we want to have a relationship that is fair, as
Yes,
fair as it can be,
that's
that
right.
we have that equal playing field, that respect. If we could keep that as our ideal instead of keeping our ideal as the flowers and hearts and rainbows of the Twitter-pated,
That's
you
right.
know,
That's
romance, but realize that as we go for the long haul of true committed love,
that's right.
we're looking for stability, we're looking for mutual respect
Yes.
and fun. I mean, come
Yes.
on.
Yeah, of course, of course. You know, the other thing I say to people too, that you can be yourself with someone,
Yeah,
that's so important, and so many people can't. Even if the marriage is, they can't be themselves. So then you wonder, well, how real can you be? How authentic can you be?
yeah. That's a good question. That should be a question before they get married. How
Yes.
real can I be with this person?
Yes. That's
I
right.
love that. I'm
Yeah.
gonna start using that.
Yeah. Good. I'm glad. Yes, yes, yes. Yeah. Yeah.
That's good. Yeah, because and see, that's where the criticism and the verbal abuse comes in is they're not accepting of who you are. You can't be yourself. You're walking on eggshells because
Yes.
you're going to do or say something that's going to set off the tirade, the putting down,
Yes.
and so there's that total breakdown of
Yes.
authenticity, respect, and all of that.
Yes. Yeah, the putting down the abuse, the verb that has to be because of the fear, you wonder, can they not be themselves being vulnerable, so they'll put somebody down instead?
Mhm.
You know? So
Yeah,
I think that's great. Can you be real? That's a great beginning, especially for young people getting married, to let them know that's so important.
it is. Yeah.
Yeah. And to be
I've
able to laugh together, but go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I was just thinking everything we're saying is triggering memories for
Yeah,
me, but
yeah. Yeah.
I was, dating a guy early on before I met my husband, and we had talked about marriage, but I could not even tell him what restaurant I wanted to eat at if he asked me. I just could not be myself. It was never meant to be. He knew it, I knew it, we broke up. He married the right person, and I married the right person, and
Yes.
more power to him, right? I was
Yes.
thrilled for him, but I realized if I can't even tell him where I wanna have dinner, that's not gonna build a good marriage.
No. No, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. You need to because that's yeah, that's a sign of yeah. Right.
Well,
So
what else would you like to address when talking about marriage? Because 'Cause we've talked about abuse.
yeah,
What else, can we address for young people today
yeah,
who are either looking at marriage or are now in a marriage and
yeah,
want to have a solid,
yes,
thriving marriage?
yeah. So the other thing is in sickness and health, so many people leave, they don't want to deal with and as someone that and not because I had someone that I cared for that had a lot of health problems, but there is something to be said that the marriage is not all fun and games. It's fun. You want to be able to laugh together, have joy together, but you have to also be able to deal with the going when the going gets rough, right? Because years ago when I'll never forget this person. I did these evaluations, and this lovely man came to have, when I did gastric. And think of this because I think of these episodes, and he did his work. His wife had MS, and a year later she came in, and they weren't sure they were going to give her the surgery, and they did because her reason was she didn't want her caregivers to have to lift her. He stuck by her thick and thin, like there was not a question mark. And so many people, the excuse, well, they can't handle it. Well, life is hard. You better
Yeah.
learn to handle it because what if it's you on the other side? And I've heard stories even where people leave because they have a disabled child but
Mhm.
this is marriage, so you have to be willing to stick through it. Something can change just like that. Is your bond so thick, so attached that you can weather the storm? And maybe the storm is a short, rainstorm, or maybe it's a long, long, long storm. We don't know. But life's not always fair or easy. We don't know why. And as a person of faith, I believe God has his reasons for whatever. He gives us free
Right.
will, but you have to be willing to stick it out.
That's good. Yes.
You know,
So
yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
I just sorry.
And that's all
I
right. No, no,
I
guys.
always feel like I wanted my daughter is always joking about how she's adulting, and
Yes.
there's something about that we gotta grow up. We can't be having temper tantrums when we're in our 20s and 30s. We need to grow up, what do we say? Put our big girl pants on and,
Yeah.
go for it. When we first got married, my husband, had cancer.
Yeah. Okay.
We had been married 2 months, I think. Let's see, 3 months,
Yeah.
and he was diagnosed with cancer, and they said if they hadn't caught it when they did, he would have died within a month, and God
Wow.
saved his life, but it triggered in me this total fear of, am I really first of all, am I really committed to a relationship where he could be disabled or
Yeah.
something?
Right.
But I was really angry with him for almost dying.
Yes. Yes.
And
Yes.
fearful and all of that, and I actually went to counseling to deal with
Yes.
all of that because it triggered so many things from when my parents divorced and all of that, and
Yes.
I learned so much during that time, and my faith grew
Yeah.
hugely.
Yes.
I had a wonderful therapist who every time I met with him, he would start by quoting 2 Timothy 1:7, "For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of love and power and a sound mind," and because I was in so much fear that Dave was going to die.
Yeah.
You just don't know. And then we had 4 children, 3 of them are on the autism spectrum.
Yeah.
The first 2 were born with clefts, so we
Okay.
had a lot to carry early,
Yes.
as young people. We'd been married 7 years when we had our first child. Thankfully, we had that length of time
Yeah.
because it was hard. Lots of doctor's appointments and everything, and today so many people are dealing with neurodiverse
Yes.
children who it carries a lot of baggage you've got to deal with, and I know so many parents, they divorce because of that,
Yeah.
because one of them just isn't going to step up, and we've got to somehow help young people thinking of marriage to understand maturity, to
Yes.
understand, yes, marriage is wonderful and fun and awesome, but it's also hard, it's challenging, and
Yes.
life just wants to kick you in the teeth
Yeah.
sometimes.
You
And
know, you brought up a good point. People don't want to get married. I saw that in your when you reached out about who would like to talk about this issue around marriage. People just think, oh, it's a piece of paper. Why get married? We can have kids. There's this lackadaisical approach to the greatest institution that has helped civilization grow, and I have I get my own backup when I hear about if somebody, oh, we just had a couple of kids, we don't want to get married, maybe someday. And I'm thinking, no, you're doing a disservice to the child. Now, don't get me wrong. If
yes,
somebody gets pregnant and they have a baby and the guy doesn't want to be with them, fine, then get him out, move on, find someone that will love you and the child, or love you at least. And if he wants to have an involvement or vice versa. But this lackadaisical, oh, we don't need marriage. That piece of paper
that's
makes
true.
you work at it. And so I think you're right. This new adulting, and I've heard that term also, this new adulting, people 30, 40, 50 years ago that were not as blessed with innovation like we have, 60, 70, how about a century ago, they did what they had to do. They just raised their kids. They did what they had to do. They didn't complain. There's a lot to complain about sometimes, but they just did what they had to do. And this society, this generation is so privileged now, and yet everything is hard. Marriage is hard. Why bother? No, marriage is good. Children, if you're blessed to have children, it's a wonderful thing. And but get married first, or at
Yes.
least find the right person quickly if you can't, and move on.
Yeah. Amen. I
Yes,
agree so
yes,
much, and it really breaks my heart to see so many young Christians
yes,
who don't get that marriage is God ordained, God
yes,
directed, and is an institution that builds, like you said, builds the society. It's a foundational part of our society,
yes,
and we have weakened our society by just living together and
yes,
not treating marriage with the respect it deserves.
yes.
In fact, it's become a joke in
Yes,
so many people's lives, and
yes,
it's I think it's offensive to God in more than we realize, not just in the fact that we're breaking a law by having sex before marriage, but
yeah,
disrespecting what God has set up and the picture that it is of our relationship with God, that
yes,
there's that complete unconditional love that you don't get without that piece of paper,
yes,
honestly. It's very
absolutely.
hard to have that without that. I agree.
It's a sacred, and there's a quote I want to tell you, and I it's in my book, but it's by Gustav Mahler, and it's and I'll read it to you as you. It's in the beginning of my book, and I love it
Okay.
because I found it, and I thought this is so true because I need to use this, and my publisher said sure, and I'm going to read it to you as soon as I get to. But it's really about tradition and and how it's important to uh, have tradition. I can't. Yeah, here it is. Oh, I'm coming to it right now. But it's here. It is. Tradition is not the worship of ashes, but the preservation of fire.
Ooh, oh, I love that.
By Mahler, Gustav Mahler. And I thought, yes, and that's what marriage is.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Wow. We need to really pray that our
Yes.
world understands the value and the importance of marriage and the sacred, like you said, it's a sacred commitment.
Yes.
Yeah, the infatuation and romantic love is awesome, and I
Yes.
thank God for it, but the commitment that love is in a marriage is so rich and
Yeah.
such a wonderful blessing, and, to know that you are seen by another person as you are and loved anyway is
Yes.
is awesome.
You know, years ago there was a movie that came out. I can't remember the title, but it was with Michael Douglas, and he played a philanderer. He just went with every young person, and then he went back to his college, or he went back where he was a college professor. I can't recall. But Danny DeVito was there, and Danny DeVito said, "You know, these young women come and go." And so Michael Douglas said to him, "How do you resist all these attractive women?" And he said, "Because my best friend's next to me every night, and that's who I want to be with."
Oh, that's nice.
And and I'm paraphrasing obviously, but I never
Yeah,
forgot that. And that
yeah.
was so, it's true.
Our one of our favorite movies is Family Man with Nicolas Cage. It's
Oh
kind of a
yes.
Christmas movie
Yes.
and kind of the same theme of
Yes.
what you're missing out on when you give up that ideal of having a marriage.
Yes.
And that's not to say being single is terrible. I have
No.
my best friend is single and
Yes.
she knows God has called her to that and
Yes.
she is happy and fulfilled in her life
Yes.
the way it is. But if you have an opportunity to get married, I think it can be such an amazing blessing when we have the right understanding and attitude about it.
That's right. Yes. I have single friends, the same thing. And again, it's not for, if you don't find the right one, you're better off. You're better to be, I mean, for that really to not be
True.
with someone that really is hurtful. But you're right,
Yeah.
absolutely. But I think again, a realistic view of what marriage is.
Yeah, that's true. So I think too, that's one thing we should encourage young people. If you are thinking of marriage, get premarital counseling.
Yes.
There's wisdom in that. I've seen many marriages go through the storms because of that premarital counseling.
Yes.
It really set the groundwork that they needed. And you can do that with a pastor, with a counselor, or some pastors have their counseling degrees as well. And it is such a gift. It helps because we don't have a little, training in growing up other than what we see. to know how to build a marriage.
That's right.
We need the little bit of help. And
Yes,
and
absolutely.
if you've seen your parents and they have a strong marriage, that doesn't mean you still understood why they have
That's
a
right.
strong marriage.
That's right.
And so many marriages don't succeed today. So a lot of what we've seen has been dysfunctional or abusive or whatever. And so to build a strong marriage, we need that.
Yes.
We need a little
Yes.
class.
That's right. That's right. That's
Learn.
right. And really get people to understand that you just have to be there for each other. You have to listen. You can laugh together, but you also have to recognize sometimes it can change. Just like, things can, black swans can happen, right? So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I appreciate your words of wisdom and encouragement here today. Do you have anything else you'd like to add before we finish up today?
No, I just want people to keep, I think, just keep growing, keep being curious, keep enhancing yourself, what enhancing your relationship, bring new things to it because you can learn from each other. I think those are people that have children, keep having those family dinners, have fun at them, go around the table, share something fun, share a new word. So just keep producing what God gives us in here. And I think as long as we
Yeah.
have life, and I'll quote, I think, Rick Warren, he said, as long as you're alive, you have purpose. I'm paraphrasing, I think. And I think that's true. So yeah,
That
that's
is
it.
true.
Yeah,
Yeah. And we can follow the example in your novel and go take tango lessons with our
that's
husband, and that
right.
would be
That's
fun.
that's right. That's right. And I have it right in the novel. So yes, I may go out and do it again myself. So how about that? Yes.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time to be with us today,
Thank you.
and thank you for your words.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. Have a lovely, lovely day.
You too.
Bye bye.
Thank you for spending time with us today. If we sparked any questions or you want to share a comment, we would love to hear from you. You can post that on our blog at terryhellardbrown.com. If you'd like to reach Darlene, you can reach her through her website, and we will have those links in the show notes. Feel free to contact her. You can email her or you can go to her website. You can even hire her as a therapist. She counsels through virtual counseling sessions online. So no matter where you are, you can still hire her as a therapist if you would like. And so I will have those links in the show notes. She said she would be happy to hear from you if you have any questions. We pray you feel empowered to walk by faith and to embrace everyday discipleship every day with the people in your life. God bless you and have a great day.